Thank you, band. I want to give a special shout out to Sam. He probably wouldn't want me to tell everybody, but he just looks so great up on there. He's actually on the last day of his 7-day fast. So, it's like giving it and getting it. So, today I am following up with Pastor Adonia's message from last week where we kicked off our new series on the School of Love. Practical and spiritual guidance on deepening our most important relationships. And last week, Pastor Adonia gave a really great message. If you didn't hear it, I encourage you to definitely go back and watch the recording. She talked about these 5 regrets that people have at the end of their life and how they all have to do with relationships. They have to do with your relationship with God, your relationship with yourself, and your relationship with others. And it was really just a great reminder of, I guess, how easily time can slip by. And we find ourselves spending so much time and energy focusing on things that ultimately we may kind of regret at the end of our life. And just a kind of a reminder. I think it happens to everybody. There's no need to cast judgment, but we all find ourselves in a rut sometimes. So I was really grateful for the message. It reminded me of a lot of things that I had to think about. And today I want to talk a little bit about, we're going to be going into these different relationships in the School of Love, right? Your relationship with your spouse, your relationship with your kids, your relationship with your parents, your relationship with God, your siblings. And each one we're going to give a message on. But before we go into that, I'm going to be talking about, today I want to talk a little bit about kind of the spiritual significance about why we invest into these things. Because I think a lot of times, we think, well, it's good to invest into them, right? It's good to invest into our relationships. Naturally, we all want deeper relationships. It's good for myself, my happiness, my fulfillment. But there's also kind of a deeper reason why these are important to invest into as well. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So when we talk about, when you think about a spiritual life or a religious life, often what comes to mind is this idea of like faithfulness or obedience to God. And we see often in the Bible and in history of religion, we see a lot of like piety, sacrifice. Many times, priests, nuns, monks, they gave up everything to be a part of kind of the, to be in a fully religious life. So they could spend all of their energy and time on God, not worrying about money, not worrying about a family, not worrying about, what clothes you're going to wear, and just kind of focus everything on what is most important, right? This was kind of almost a definition of what it meant to be like a holy person, up until, I think, very recently. But it's important to understand that some things change and some things don't. For example, Adonia and I are pastors, but I don't think there's anybody here who thinks that we are holy, right? Which is fine with me because I don't need that kind of pressure or stress. I'm perfectly okay to not be that way. Also, the divine principle teaches us that over time, God has revealed his word and his truth and his understanding to people gradually. In the Old Testament times, people weren't ready for Jesus' teaching. We got the 10 Commandments and other laws, many laws. And when Jesus came, we received the Bible. After Jesus' time, the Bible, Jesus' teachings, the story of the apostles, and the story of the early Christian church. And in today's time, in our faith, we receive the divine principle, which is kind of a continuation of those things. And I'm sure that at that time, in the Old Testament and the New Testament, in that transition time, when they were transitioning from the Old Testament to the New Testament times, that was a difficult thing to digest. that people had to accept that the Old Testament stories of Noah and Moses and Abraham and Adam and Eve were not enough. That there was a time that needed to come where a deeper understanding of God and our purpose in life was needed. Even Jesus said there would come a time when he would speak to us plainly of the Father. He was basically saying that the people of the time weren't ready for what he really wanted to be able to express to them. So it's no different for us as our children, you know. When you have 2- and 3-year-old children, you're not going to try to teach them the periodic table of elements, right? You're not going to try to teach them how to cook. You're not going to try to teach them how to fix a car because they're not ready for that. And if they tried, they'd probably just hurt themselves or cause a fire or something like that. I always feel really anxious because our youngest is she wants to do everything on her own. And that includes putting things in the microwave and the toaster and cooking things. And it's like, I try to tell her, like, you could start a fire, you know? And she doesn't want to listen to me, so I have to try to find creative ways to encourage her to still be independent, but to be a little bit careful and to be a little bit like, hey, just check with us, you know, like, and but as your kids get older and they mature, then you can give them deeper content. You can give them more complicated tasks. You can give them greater responsibilities. And, if you do it well, then hopefully they will become mature, responsible, independent adults. And it's been the same way for God in history. God has had to give human beings what we are ready for. So as I said, some things change and some things don't change. And one of the things and it's important for us to understand what hasn't changed. Even though we live in a world where a lot of things have changed, especially in the realm of like religion and spirituality, some things never change. Some principles don't change. And that's why it's important for us to study the Old Testament. That's why it's important for us to study the Bible. Because when we look at the Bible, and especially through the lens of the divine principle, we understand something very, very interesting about the central figures of the Old Testament, and that is that God asked them to do two things. Two things. First is the foundation of faith, demonstrating faithfulness, demonstrating that they could be obedient to God's calling and desires for their life. The second thing is what we call the foundation of substance, which is to overcome their fallen nature, to overcome something with another human being. Our faithfulness can be demonstrated in our relationship with God, and oftentimes doesn't necessarily require other people in our life. But the foundation of substance requires people in our life. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this in a minute. But basically, even though people could be faithful, could demonstrate obedience to God and faithfulness to God, if they couldn't establish this foundation of substance, then although their faithfulness was still meaningful, they couldn't really accomplish what God had wanted them to accomplish in their time, in the task that they were given. All the central figures of the past were asked to do something to establish their faithfulness and then also to substantiate that in a relationship to another person. It would be nice if in the time of Noah that he could have spent his life building the boat on the mountain, and then once he finished it, he was like, okay, I've been faithful, I did what God asked me to do, and I'm good. But actually the story doesn't go like that. After the flood and after everything was done, then because his son Ham was ashamed of his nakedness and drunkenness in the tent, then much of that foundation that Noah had laid was lost, which is really sad if you think about it. He dedicated his whole life of obedience to God, but much of that foundation was lost just because his son couldn't respect his father. And there's kind of more deep deeper meaning to that story, but that's not something I'm going to go into today. When John the Baptist couldn't see Jesus for who he was, and eventually, over time, separated from Jesus and couldn't support Jesus, then Jesus ended up having to go the way of the cross. When the Israelites couldn't unite with Moses, and they complained about Moses, and they resented Moses, and every time Moses would go off for a while, they would do their own thing, then they ended up having to go an extended route, extra 40 years of their journey. And Moses himself wasn't able to enter the land of Canaan himself. On the other hand, it really highlights that, specifically in the story of Jacob and Esau, that embracing and reconciliation was a hugely pivotal moment in history and set the stage, that specific situation set the stage for Jesus to be able to come at that time. So similarly, some things haven't changed, and God still today asks us to demonstrate a certain degree of faithfulness, a certain degree of obedience to his word, to his desires for our life. If God calls, then we want to be able to respond. But then also we have to establish our foundation of substance. And this is kind of, I think, more difficult than I think that we give it credit for. It's the area that most of the Old Testament figures struggled with. They, of course, being able to make an offering and to be able to dedicate your life to God, that's hard. But then when they had to fulfill the foundation of substance, that was when things got too difficult for many of them. And so I think today often we get stuck too. And even in our most difficult moments in our life, we can still be true to God. We can still say, God, no matter how bad things get, no matter how difficult my life gets, I'm not going to turn my back on you. I'm going to follow this path that you've laid out for me. But then sometimes to be able to turn around and offer that same level of dedication and sincere heart and love to another human being, maybe somebody in my family, can be really difficult. And in some ways, we know that God is never going to turn his back on us. God is never going to hate us, no matter how much we may resent him. So we can be we can be however we want to be with God. We can make our relationship with God whatever we want it to be. But we can't do that with other people. I think that in our movement, we've been very challenged to establish this foundation of substance within our own communities. You know, when I look at our movement as a whole, our family churches around the country and the world, I look at all your faces, there's no lack of faithfulness in our family. There's absolutely no lack of faithfulness and, just a desire to want to serve and a desire to want to do something. And despite all the challenges that you have had to endure in your life, you're still here and you haven't left God. Often when the people in these Old Testament stories, when you look at those situations, they often had to overcome a certain barrier to be able to really love and unite and reconcile with the person in their situation. For example, Jesus was not, by being able to look back on history, we can see Jesus to some degree for who he was. But the people of that time couldn't see him for who he was. Even the people closest to Jesus couldn't understand what he was even talking about. How many times the disciples were like, we don't understand. And John the Baptist, who was supposed to be Jesus' right-hand man, couldn't also accept Jesus for who he was either, even though I think most Christians think he did, but he really didn't. Jesus, from the completely a humanistic viewpoint, was simply a carpenter's son and also an illegitimate child. He was born before his parents were married. So that, these days is not uncommon, but at that time, that was something you could be killed for, rightfully, in the eyes of the people at that time. Moses wasn't a good public speaker. He had to have someone speak for him because I think he had a stutter, something like that. Anyway, he wasn't a good speaker. And also, beyond that, he was a murderer. He grew up in the comforts of the palace while all of the people that he was leading were slaves their whole life. I mean, can you imagine, you and everyone else is a slave your whole life and you're being led by somebody who grew up in the comforts of the palace? I mean, that's a little bit of I don't know if you can trust this guy. I don't know if this guy really understands what it's like to be me. And then all of a sudden you're wandering in a desert for 40 years without guaranteed food and water. Noah must have seemed like a crazy person. He built a boat on top of a mountain. I think, in reality, it's not hard to humble ourselves to somebody that we see as being better than us or has accomplished something that we are seeking for in our life. Like if Elon Musk walked into the room, then it wouldn't be hard for some of us to go up to him and be like, hey, give me some advice, How can I become a billionaire? How can I make a difference in the world, Even though he's got certain aspects of his life that are really amazing and certain aspects of his life that are, kind of unfortunate. But, somebody like that, maybe it's not so hard, but somebody that maybe you think you're better than or somebody that has obvious shortcomings maybe is a little bit different. Sometimes in life, we become stuck in doing things a certain way. Maybe because for a while those things worked for us, certain attitude, certain way of doing things. Maybe it got you through some difficult times. You maybe have heard the phrase, it's my way or the highway. But making relationships work in our life, deepening relationships in our life, which is what we're talking about in this series, establishing a foundation of substance, really creating unity, really creating harmony, creating reconciliation with the people in our lives, it doesn't work with it's my way or the highway attitude. And it didn't work for people of the Old Testament either. It requires us to be willing to change. It requires us to be willing to take responsibility that the way things are in my life or the way things are around me are partially my responsibility. And also to have a willingness to choose unity, to choose reconciliation over sometimes being right or being better. This is maybe best expressed in the story of Jacob and Esau. So I'm going to share a little bit about the story of Jacob and Esau. It's one of my favorite stories in the Bible. So after Jacob was returning from his uncle, and after having amassed a lot of wealth and wives and children and livestock, and he's coming back to his brother to try to reconcile with his brother. And in that part of the story, it says, Jacob looked up, and there was Esau coming with his 400 men to kill him. Esau was so resentful to his brother, he wanted to kill him. Not just kill. I think if you have 400 hired men, you're trying to not only kill somebody, but you're trying to make a point. You're trying to maybe get out some frustration a little bit. So Jacob divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the two female servants. He put the female servants and their children in front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph in the rear. He himself went on ahead and bowed down to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. But Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they wept. Then Esau looked up and saw the women and children. "Who are these with you?" he asked. Jacob answered, "They are the children God has graciously given your servant." Then the female servants and their children approached and bowed down. Next, Leah and her children came and bowed down. Last of all, Joseph and Rachel, and they too bowed down. Esau asked, "What is the meaning of all these flocks and herds I met?" "To find favor in your eyes, my lord," he said. But Esau said, "I already have plenty, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." "No, please," said Jacob, "if I have found favor in your eyes, accept this gift from me, for to see your face is like seeing the face of God. Now that you have received me favorably, please accept the present that was brought to you. For God has been gracious to me, and I have all I need." And because Jacob insisted, Esau accepted it. You know, Jacob was, to his understanding, justified in what he did to take the birthright from his brother. I think from our eyes, it seems like a pretty nasty thing to do, and that Esau's anger was justified. But Jacob did it because that's what he thought was the right thing to do. So he could have easily had the attitude that I don't need to humble myself to my brother. I don't need to try to win my brother over. If he resents me, then just let it be. It's fine. We'll just let bygones be bygones. So that is all to say that maybe the people in your life that you struggle with the most, that you resent the most, that you hate, maybe, it's a strong word we don't like to use, but that you struggle with, maybe God put that person in your life to help you establish this foundation of substance in your own walk of faith. Or at the very least, for you to grow to be a more wholesome, godly person. Most likely, if you look in your immediate nuclear family, you will find some of these people. But it was because Jacob and Esau could reconcile. It was because they could unite, because it was the first biblical central figure family after Cain and Abel and Noah's family that could really establish this like family reconciliation, overcoming the resentment, overcoming the anger, the judgment that they felt towards their brother or family member, that God could make the foundation for Jesus to come in that lineage. That's what the divine principle teaches us. And it's also interesting that within that family also all of Islam is descended as well. So family is really important. And we don't have to look far to find people that maybe we can humble ourselves with. Maybe we can try to find some reconciliation with. And I wanted to share this final quote from our founder, Reverend Moon, on this topic. What has God been looking for? He does not seek a subject partner, rather he seeks ideal object partners. He looks for those who resemble him and reflect the inner and outer aspects of the world he created. The results of this search and the new starting point is the family. Nothing can represent the universe better than the family. Unity with one's parents is the meeting point of past and present in our families. With each of us at the center, we can love the past by loving our parents, love the present by loving our spouse, and love the future by loving our children. To deeply experience the love of 3 generations is to connect the past, the present, and the future. The family is the core body where these 3 kinds of love are concentrated. So I think that the term foundation of substance is a very interesting term. I like the concept of substance, right? Substance is like something you can touch, something you can see and feel and experience. And I think, in a way, where we're at in the world right now, people are really looking for that. People are looking for substance. everybody has an opinion. Everybody has a thought or, a way of thinking about things. And with the internet and the social media age, we're constantly bombarded by all these things. But I think people are really looking for substance. People are saying, well, that's a really good idea. That's a really good theory. That's a really good theology. That's a really nice religion. Can you show me something, Show me something that I can feel and experience and grasp. People, yeah, I don't know what you said, but yeah. People want to experience it. And I think that the world is desperately looking for something like that. We had a video call with somebody yesterday, and she wanted to do a case study on our church. And our local church specifically. And it was kind of like, oh, that's flattering, because in a way I don't feel like we have any astronomical amazing accomplishment to be able to share with the world. But I really do believe that there is something of substance in this community, that especially when we look at our unificationist family, people are looking for that. People are looking for that substance. And she really felt that there's something of substance here, and she wanted to know a little bit more about it. And I thought that was really nice. I hope that in the years to come, we can really build on that substance so it can be something that can even be recognized by the world as a whole, not just a few people here and there. We have a long way to go, but that's okay. But, we want to naturally learn from somebody who's substantiated something in their life that we're looking for. If I want to have a good family, if I want to be wealthy, if I want to have a fulfilling life, then naturally we're going to look for somebody or some people that have created that in reality in their life. And so I think that also to some degree, God also wants us to be able to create this thing in our life of substance. And the more and more people are looking for it, the more and more I think God wants his people to be able to have it so that it can be shared and experienced and discovered by everyone who's looking for it. And I think, that's just even more, I'm even more encouraged to see that this year we have 7 families that are planning to move here. Our first family's visiting. They'll be here in a month. And we have 6 more, and I just realized that Casimir is moving here this year. I totally forgot. Where is he? Oh, he left. I totally forgot about him, Justine's husband, and so I'm really excited about that. I think it's because they see something of substance, not like in the building, but in the people in our community, which is really hopeful. That's really inspiring. I'm really grateful and humbled. And I hope that can encourage you as you're on your journey and you're trying to make this substance happen in your life and in your most important relationships. Please join me in prayer. Good morning, our most beloved Heavenly Parent. I really hope and pray that in our small community here, every day and every moment we can be trying and striving to reconnect to our source, to the root of all things that are good in this world. And even though we experience many difficulties in our life and many hardships, and sometimes we just want to escape from it all, I really hope, Heavenly Parent, that your presence and your guidance in our life can shine through. That we can each day reconnect. Why am I here? Why am I alive? What are you wanting to do in my life? I really believe that you have hopes and desires for each and every single person. And that in each of our lives, although we have a course to travel, and sometimes that requires some overcoming some challenges, as we become closer to you, and as we become more and more like your children, more and more like the people that you want us to be, Heavenly Parent, more and more we will find a resonance with you and a resonance with all our human family and brothers and sisters in this world. Heavenly Parent, please help us and guide us as we try to make our relationships deeper, as we try to make things work in our lives, Heavenly Parent. We know that when we can make unity happen, when we can make reconciliation happen, when we can make even in tears a sincere apology and a sincere coming together of two people, we're walking in the footsteps of these past saints and sages who little by little advanced your providence in this world. And I hope that we can little by little advance it in our own lives. Please work in our lives. Please be present in our lives. We invite you into this gathering today, and we invite you into each and every one of our lives. I offer this prayer in our names as Blessed Central Family. Amen and Aju. Thank you so much.